what is your personal favorite something from nothing? Because you've done it over and over and over again in your life. What's your favorite one?
I mean, it has to be Plum Oyster Bar. I really created the restaurant because it was community. It was to bring people together. And so when I walked into that space and saw it, I went to the Troy LDC and I said, can I have a $50,000 loan? And they said, no, we're going to give it to that other guy. That restaurant closed in 6 months, but we'll give you $25,000 and we're going to take a mortgage on your house and on my mother's house. And the closing costs were like so much money.
Yeah. Not worth it.
Not worth it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't know any better.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Heidi Knoblauch. I'm taking over Seriously Connected for the month of November. This month, we're going to be talking about entrepreneurs, economic development, how to get capital for your business, and how to grow something from nothing. On this episode, my friend Jeff Buell and I are going to talk about creating something from nothing. We're going to talk about restaurants, we're going to talk about real estate, we're going to talk about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the capital region and in other middle markets across the United States. One of the key things about helping entrepreneurs is understanding what their values are. And in this episode, we talk about what our values are and what the values of most entrepreneurs are and how economic developers can reach out to them and help them grow their business. Jeff and I have an extensive background in economic development. Jeff has done $300 million of real estate development across New York State, and I've started a restaurant and also worked for a large economic development organization helping to get capital to entrepreneurs and other fund managers. People ask me a lot, what is economic development? And truly what I tell them is something that's oftentimes very surprising to them, which is that the government wants you to start and grow a company. And they're really trying desperately to help you do that. Oftentimes, they just don't know the best way to help you do that. So I act as a translator in talking with entrepreneurs and also with economic developers to help programs come together to help those who need it most. All right, so right now we have Jeff Buell on the podcast to talk about creating something from nothing.
Yeah, I feel like it's like in a podcast, not on a podcast.
That's true.
Yeah, interesting. I'm going to try not to correct you for the rest of the hour that we speak together.
I actually would prefer that you correct me. I think it would provide great content.
In the podcast, on the, I don't know. It's
I don't know, in the podcast,
whatever.
on the podcast. But
good
essentially.
Morning. Yeah, good morning. How are you?
I think I'm doing great.
Okay.
So I think that, in thinking about what the purpose of this podcast was, at first I got a little negative. And I was like, why aren't these things happening right now in the capital region? But then I thought, you know what? Jeff Buell has created a lot of something out of nothing.
That is true. I think when it comes to something out of nothing, we take for granted that things exist, right? My favorite thing to talk about that we take for granted that is like the very definition of something from nothing is infrastructure, right? Like we don't learn as kids how pipes got there and sewers work and how we're able to take a shower. It just is something that we always assumed we would have. And so societally, we struggle with the idea that you need to invest in things to get something out of it what you want. And I think there's a base level switch that needs to take place for anything to become something.
Yeah, and I think the being purposeful about it is also very hard, right? So people talk about entrepreneurial ecosystem all the time or innovation infrastructure or any of those things.
What does it even mean?
But what does it even mean?
Right.
What does it even mean?
I have no idea.
But what it means is bars and restaurants
Yep.
that have people who can congregate in them. It means startup businesses who are able to give mentorship and give back. It means access to capital. It means all of these things. And I think sometimes people try to make it happen. Selling is not something that comes natural to me. That's why I've engaged Sandler Training to help me with the sales aspect of my new consulting business. I met the person who runs the sales training here in the capital region a long time ago at a pitch competition. Matt Scarkelli has been a tremendous supporter of me, and when I knew that I needed to engage somebody to figure out how to grow my consulting business, I reached out to him. The trainings are super easy to attend because they're all virtual. We meet once a week and there's a cohort, so I get to interact with a bunch of different people who are also working to develop this skill. Matt didn't make me feel weird or embarrassed by saying that I need some help with this. He told me that everybody needs help with sales training and that you can always improve. And really, it's all about having a conversation and figuring out what kind of problems you're solving for your customer base. And if you want to reach out to Matt, it's super easy. He's really accessible. You can give him a call on his cell phone, which is 518-366-0004, and just tell him that Heidi sent you.
My whole explanation of how I feel about things is always just like what happened to me in the last 2 hours, right? So this morning I was like, doom scrolling through the interwebs, and, I was watching reels, and I came across one from Adam Duritz, the lead singer of Counting Crows, who voted yesterday and was walking from his polling place to Washington Square Park in New York City, talking about how we need to vote because that's the core value of America, and this is blah, 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 and not telling anybody who we voted for. And it sticks in my head as you say infrastructure, and you start talking about the things that you think are required, and really what they all do is like livability. And I was watching that reel today, and I thought, like, here's a guy who's made tens of millions of dollars in his life, and like his whole afternoon was, I'm just going to walk to the park. And like that concept of that infrastructure existing in that place actually drives people who are naturally innovative and want to be an entrepreneur into a place where they can live a cool life. And so for me, like, it's really basic, silly stuff like, can I walk somewhere?
But you also said something very interesting, which is values, right?
Yeah.
So what we create from nothing is very much related to our values.
Super solid.
So speaking of, the other day,
Yeah.
I asked you, I said, Jeff, I want you to look through these thousands of cards.
Yeah.
And I want you to pick out your core values. So we're going to do something right now.
Yeah.
I think you got down to maybe 8.
I got down, like, my first go, there's like hundreds of cards in there, right?
Yeah, 1,000.
There's 1,000?
I think so.
Yeah, I got down to 15 in probably like 5 minutes. I thought I did a super job.
You did do a super job.
And then you're like, get it down to 6. And I was like, okay. And then it was interesting how they, went back and forth. But like I got to where I wanted to be pretty quickly. And I thought it was a good summation of me.
Yeah.
Right?
You want to talk about what those values were?
I have them here. Yeah. Even the words themselves are going to mean different things to different people. But for me, my 6 and the 3 foundation are wonder, faith, and time, because it's finite. And those things then lead to optimism, impact, and vision. And I feel like those are, I don't know that I did this exercise correctly, right? Because those are like, these are your values. And I think those are my values, but they're probably more like descriptions of who I am as well, right?
I think if your values are a description of who you are, you're doing life right.
Sure, but what an unbelievable if you just like flew in there like it wasn't a big deal, right? Like if you're have you paid attention to society? Do people like lead out with their values and what they actually are?
Well, I think if they did, especially like talking about like entrepreneurial infrastructure, talking about physical infrastructure, if they led with their values, I think we'd be in a different place.
Yeah, absolutely. And if some butts were candies and nuts, every day would be Christmas.
So we're going to do a little experiment and try to get you down to 3 and then 1.
Oh.
So you do that while I tell people what my values were.
Okay, cool.
So mine were leadership, integrity, vulnerability, hence this podcast, perseverance, adaptability, influence, vulnerability, abundance, and impact.
Yeah, those are good. Those are you.
Well, yeah, they are me. I think so. I also have a very strong sense of like who I am and what my values are and like live those out. I think you do as well.
Obsessively so, to the point where like my self-awareness is like painful. It's not, right? Like it's like I can get stuck in my head based on like this is who I am and this is what I am, and like I'm just not going to like pivot off of that. Like this is me.
Well, what I found was so interesting is we have no words in common.
Yes, we do.
What do we have in common? I hope it's my one word because I thought about that's my one word.
Bingo.
Oh
wait, I forgot we're on a podcast and I was talking. So the one word that we share is impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is my entire life.
Yeah, mine too.
It's absolutely my one word.
Yeah,
it's probably why we get along.
Yeah.
Even though we've never actually talked about it, it's probably why we are so well connected, where I just feel like if I have something on my mind that I need to work for, like you're in my 5 people for sure, right? But probably top of the pyramid.
Top of the pyramid?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
You know why? Because we got in a fight earlier this year.
Yeah, that's so funny. When I was driving here, I literally thought about that.
When I was driving here, I was thinking about it. So, I don't think we need to actually talk about the fight, but it was really just like a genuine misunderstanding. And we had this like cooling off period of like 3 days. Mm-hmm. And I was shocked at how the idea that I had hurt you in a way where like, there's like, obviously there's no romantic like connection here. I shouldn't laugh that hard, but like there's obviously no romantic connection here. And I had hurt you in a way where I was so bothered by it because I hurt you in a way where I guess typically when we hurt people, we often hurt people as a reaction to what our weaknesses are. And so we tend to then beat ourselves up when we hurt somebody. But I actually didn't do that this time, and I just hurt you, and I felt so bad that for like an entire weekend, I was trying to figure out, what can I do for Heidi to make this better?
Yeah.
And I realized over the course of that weekend how much you mean to me. And it was fascinating, and I'm like sitting here making fun of myself in my head right now because we're supposed to be talking about like an entrepreneurial infrastructure, right? But you are my infrastructure, right? Like when I had an issue this week and I needed to solve a problem, like I had two people and I was like, hey, I just need you to hear me out and walk through this. And like both of those people I talked to, you're one, my buddy Chris is another one, wildly different viewpoints on something. How can I only have two people? How can I only have two people here I would talk to? That's crazy.
It's very interesting because my circle is also very small.
Yeah.
There's somebody else who I want to bring on this podcast. Don't mention his name, but so when Christine was asking me about, the podcast and all of this stuff, and I was brainstorming, she said, what is like one of your guilty pleasures? And I said, one of my guilty pleasures is watching The Circle on Netflix. Do you know what this is?
No.
I knew you would have no idea what this is.
No, what is it?
It's a ridiculous, terrible game show.
Okay.
Wherein people are selected to live in a hotel room.
Oh, dear.
And they can only communicate with other people through their TV with something called The Circle. And they have to speak out text messages to one another.
Okay.
And then they vote people off.
Okay.
And so as part of this, people develop these alliances. Now, I will tell you, the way that they develop these alliances is like they exchange like two text messages and they're like, yeah, that person's in my alliance. But you and I have developed an alliance.
Oh, yeah, we have an alliance.
We have an alliance, like a full-blown alliance. And there's one other person that is in this alliance that I think we should bring on to the next episode.
What's interesting about the other person in our alliance is that you and I and him don't really ever, like we're like a literal triangle where like I talk to him, I talk to you, you talk to him, you talk to me. Like we don't ever do like the three-way conversation.
Except for COVID.
Except during COVID when we had to like, create the alliance.
We had to create the alliance, and that was part of building the infrastructure.
This is on Netflix?
Yeah.
Never even heard of it.
Yeah, it's really bad.
Algorithms are weird, man.
Yeah, it's it's like a shameful thing that I'm admitting that
I didn't even know you watched TV, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised you have a TV.
Yeah, so I don't watch a ton of TV. And the things that I watch, you would guess, like Parks and Rec, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, basically like any government office that has a 30-minute sitcom, like I'm totally in for.
Okay. All right. Did you watch The Office?
I didn't watch The Office.
There's a great episode where Dwight asks Jim to form an alliance. And they to like work through something. So when you said alliance, I was like, okay, Dwight.
That's really funny. This hot take brought to you by me. I am so confused why our headlights are so bright. And it feels like what we're doing is we're just making all of our headlights brighter in an effort to see better. And truly, it's just flooding the night and also flooding my eyes. And it's giving me both headaches and an inability to drive at night. So my hot take is, let's just dim it down, If you have automatic headlights, make sure they're on auto. If you don't have automatic headlights, make sure you flick them off when you're driving towards a car. Take those high beams down. The high beams are blinding me. So what's very interesting, so you mentioned we got in a fight. I wasn't thinking about that fight.
Oh, you were thinking about a different one?
Yeah.
Wow, that's funny because I can't even think of a different one.
Yeah. So I totally forgot about that fight.
Okay.
So the fight that I was thinking about is you and I had not a cooling off period, but we just like weren't as close for a period of time.
Oh, yeah.
Like we just weren't as close for a period of time.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that? Because like that's like real.
That's real.
Yeah, that's actually entrepreneurship.
Actually.
Do you want me to lead into it?
Please.
So for people who have no idea who I am, welcome. I have a series of wildly interesting real estate developments that started 12 years ago when I started my company. And I think that's where the something out of nothing comes from, right? Because when I started, I had, I can like still see my bank account. I had $8,500 in the bank. And, now I'm part of a group that's invested $300 million over the past 12 years. So like, that's the definition of something out of nothing. What I have found over the past 12 years is I'm super good at some stuff. Like I'm the best at some of the stuff that I do. And quite literally the worst at other things that I do. And the backside of the things that I do require analytical minds and like grueling hours and brutal stuff, right? And so post-COVID, we were in a spot where we needed somebody to come in and rescue us. And obviously, I think the worldview, I think overall I'm a big believer in if you can just capture talent, the talent will rise to the top and you can figure out how to solve your problems that way. And so I came to you and said, hey, have this terrific opportunity to run this side of the company. Like you'll come in, you'll be the vice president, like you'll be unbelievable and well-intentioned all around, right? And you and I personally worked through how this was going to work and thought, okay, let's do it, right? And then everybody inside of our organization was like, naturally, I think entrepreneurs view what I just said all the same way. It's probably the one thing we all agree on. If you collect talent and the talent rises to the top, like your organization will be better. Hire the best people, do the best job. And I remember like 2 days before you started, I was like, Heidi, this is either going to be a 30-year partnership or you'll be gone in 3 weeks. And there's absolutely no in between. And how long did you last?
14 days.
And honestly, it felt like 14 years.
Yeah.
Because by day 4, I was like, this was a mistake, right? And like, let's see if you can figure it out. And like the pieces of like the puzzle that we needed you to do, you could have been good at. But it wasn't who you were.
Yeah. And so after that,
we didn't talk for a while.
We didn't talk for a little while.
Yeah.
And
I mostly was allowing you space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so the fight that we got on, it wasn't even a fight. I basically called and said, I told you so.
Yeah.
And you yelled at me.
I did?
You did.
I don't even remember this.
I remember exactly where
Terrific.
I was.
Tell me. I don't remember it at all.
I was on Best Road. I was like driving. I kind of like got on this road and I'm driving. I remember the exact point that I was at.
Yeah.
Because you don't really yell at me.
No. I would.
You would never.
I can't believe I did, actually. I have no idea what I said to you.
Yeah, you yelled at me.
What did I say?
You basically were like, you think I don't know that?
No what?
Just like, I basically was just being like a know-it-all.
Yeah.
I was basically being a know-it-all. And you were like, you think I don't know that?
Yeah, that's a great comment, right.
Yeah, and I was just kind of like, oh, I hurt Jeff.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting that the two of us developed like this deep alliance because like I hurt you one time and you hurt me one time. That's very funny. And I actually think talking about that a little bit, like zooming out, so all of this infrastructure is created with people, right?
Yeah.
So like
101. Infrastructure 101 is human beings.
Human beings.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And so when people are trying to say, okay, we want to build something, the only way they can do that is by creating these alliances, for lack of a better term, by creating these relationships, by kind of moving something forward.
Yeah.
And so I sometimes feel like in economic development, people try to do that too artificially.
In my view, is more of a lack of authenticity.
Yeah, or it's not really understanding how entrepreneurs work. It's not understanding their values.
It's not. Yes, that's it. And it goes so far beyond that, right? So like it's they don't understand the value proposition of the human population as a whole, right? Yeah. So we don't understand, particularly where we are from. There is a, I mostly say this in like a joking manner, even though it's true, but like in upstate New York where we are, it feels like we're about 10 years behind the rest of the world all the time. And that has shrunk in the past 15 years thanks to social media and us being connected to other things. I feel like now maybe we're only 5 years behind the rest of the world. But the way that is punishing to our potential. We cannot make the proper investments in the proper places because we don't understand what people's value proposition is for their life in general. And if we can't do the general population, we're never going to get to the entrepreneur.
I totally agree. It's very interesting to me that people don't think of you as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think people don't think of me in general, so we should start there, right? Like I'm not important enough to be like in people's view shed on a daily basis. I'm not an elected official. I don't control anything. So I think most of that is derived from the fact that I work in real estate, and I don't think anybody views that as entrepreneurial. And it's mostly like a rich person's game, and the rich get richer, right? So it's very unusual for someone to jump into real estate with absolutely nothing and actually be successful.
But I think something that you and I share is that we can basically, if you give us a problem, especially if it's a problem for like how to get money to move something forward.
Yo, I'll solve it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, really, I think that is our unique combined skill set.
Problem solvers.
But but like how do we fuel this? Mm-hmm. I think that's something that people don't
How do we fuel what?
So for instance, like a project that you're working on actually it's a fantastic project. I don't know if you're okay with me talking about it, but with CollarWorks.
Yeah, CollarWorks is a nonprofit arts organization in the city of Troy that's been around for a little over a decade. And they were at this inflection point where they either had to disappear and move on or grow into a space that could fully embrace what they were capable of doing. So they had this point where they needed to go to the next step, which is challenging for everyone. But then when you introduce a nonprofit not inclined to chase dollars correctly and figure out how to get the money to do things, a shock to the system. And so, yes, now we're working with them to create a new space, a new home, where they're basically, with me by their side, operating as like a for-profit developer, trying to figure out how to get a new space. And it's been a fascinating experience, exhausting.
Well, so one of my words was perseverance, which I think is the most problematic word in my values. I want to talk to you about why, because I think you might share this.
Well, that's a great topic because I want to tell you what I think is your most problematic, and then I'd like to do it in reverse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
great.
Go ahead. Yeah,
okay.
Perseverance.
So I think perseverance is, in a way, my worst quality because I don't like to do things that aren't hard.
You don't like to do things that aren't hard. I would agree completely.
And so a huge problem with that is that I am really good at a lot of things.
Yeah.
Really good at a lot of things that make a lot of money, really good at a lot of things that, can help a lot of people. And when it's not hard, when I'm not like killing myself over it, when I'm not like bending over backwards, I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's like something I should be working on.
Yeah, that's deep. That's painful to listen to.
Yeah. What do you think is my worst word? I know what you're thinking.
You switched one of your words, didn't you? Because I criticized you.
Yeah. No, not because you criticized me, but because I realized it wasn't right.
It wasn't right. Yeah.
The word was status.
Status. It bothered me so much.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Actually, this is a great topic because since leaving the state of New York, so I used to work for Empire State Development, which is New York State's economic development arm. And working for them, I was working on the SSBCI dollars. So it's a state-sponsored credit initiative, which is used to make equity investments and access to capital for entrepreneurs, fund managers, to help them start and grow their business. Dream job, great, wonderful. The problem was I felt very constrained by this job. And since leaving that job, now, not even 2 months ago, I've been offered 3 jobs. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them have been very attractive. And a lot of them have had this status and money
associated
with them.
Yeah.
And so speaking of connections, for me, for my network, I have to have like a level of advisors. So I don't actually consider you in that vein because like I call you all the time for everything and I value your opinion, but it's like as a friend level. This kind of board of advisors that I have are like people who I just deeply respect. And one of them, I explained that I had received this job. And I didn't say to you, I was like, Jeff, should I take this job?
Yeah.
To this advisor, I was like, I'm not taking this job,
Okay.
And so, and what he told me is that I need to burn my boats. And he told me that I need to burn my boats. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, when explorers went to Mexico and other places in South America, the captain of these ventures said that you have to burn your boats so that you have no ability to get back to the mainland and you just have to live and survive on your new territory. And so I said, I relate to that so much. And so I went and I bought some boats because he said, you should actually burn your boats.
Yeah.
You should have a party.
Symbolic.
He's like, I'll come.
You're going to burn it in the podcast studio?
I don't think so. I have a nice pond at my house that
Yeah.
I was thinking about.
Oh,
like,
you do, yeah.
Yeah, like launching them out, and this
Have a
this
little
is like
thing.
perfect.
You're going to
like,
blow up your boat. You're not going to burn it.
That's not gonna blow up the boat.
Yeah.
But the best part is he said that I have an armada, so I bought all these boats. They're just sitting in my car right now.
To some people, this may be coming off as weird, but it's actually just totally
So
you.
me. It's so me.
It's totally you.
So I have all these boats now.
Yeah.
And I like actually have these boats, these things that are giving me potential refuge as I embark on these new things. So, as I've said, I decided to burn my boats. And in deciding to burn my boats, I also knew that I needed to engage a wide network to help me along the way. That's why I've engaged Sandler Training to help me with the sales aspect of my new consulting business. Sandler offers consulting and training services in 3 areas: sales, management, and customer service. One of the best things about Sandler is it helps me develop boundaries with customers by setting upfront contracts with them at the beginning of any of our engagements. And this is really helpful both for me and for a potential customer because it helps us get on the same page. And if you want to reach out to Matt, it's super easy. He's really accessible. You can give him a call on his cell phone, which is 518-366-0004, and just tell him that Heidi sent you.
I've done this before.
You've burnt your boats?
I did. I wouldn't have described it in that moment as doing that, although I did it for a very specific reason. And when you were telling that story, I was actually starting to get emotional. My background before I was an entrepreneur, and this may be why people don't think of me as an entrepreneur. I worked in government, right, which is like the opposite of entrepreneurial. I did 7 years in this government job, and when I left, I went to go work for a large real estate company, and I just wanted to switch. There was something calling me to leave this system that I was in that was like killing my joy, because more than, I don't take offense to the idea that no one thinks of me as an entrepreneur. You know what I do take offense to? People not valuing that I'm a person of creativity. And, I consider myself actually as a real estate developer, somebody as part of the creative economy. Like I genuinely value myself that way. And so I left and I started this job. And do you know the first thing that I did? As I was leaving, I cashed out my New York State retirement system, which I was 3 years away from vesting in and would have been there forever. I could have gone back into the job. Look at this shocked face over here. I was like I literally burned my boat. I had nothing to go back to, because when I cashed out, if I went back, I would have been at day one, right? So it was like those 7 years were gone. It wasn't a lot of money. It was like maybe $15,000, right? It was like nothing. And I burned my boat and I had no place to go back. And I think it's probably the smartest thing that I've ever done.
Yeah, I love the burning the boat.
Yeah.
I really do.
Because you can't take chances in life with a safety net underneath you. That's why high wire acts matter, right? Because people walk along a high wire and they have nothing to catch them. If there was something to catch them below, it would be like, cool, man, you know how to fall, right? Like that's nothing, right? That's not a real thing. When you remove the safety net from your ability to function, personally, I think that's when you are hardwiring your own mind to make sure that it is always going to be capable of solving your problems. And if it isn't capable of solving the problem, it means there probably isn't a solution. And your brain will be wired to figure out, I need to get out of this
100%.
In a different way, right?
I was driving yesterday and I'd already made the decision to the latest job that came across. I was very tempted by this job.
Yeah.
And so
I laughed at you.
You did laugh at me.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually, and what I appreciate is I think a lot of the laughing you did kind of silently and rolling.
Yeah, I didn't laugh at you. Yeah. I laughed like underneath it. Yeah. I listened. I wasn't like a mean jerk. I don't want it to come across, right? Like I listened to you as a friend. I just laughed at the idea that you were considering it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think what you said is, I know that you're processing this and that you'll come around.
Yes, and then like a day later, you're like, I'm not taking that. I was like, yeah, no, I know, I know, it's good. And like I think what you're not going to do, and it'll be interesting to see if I end up being right over the next 5 years. But what you're not going to do next is you're not going to take a job.
No.
It's not happening.
No, I'm not going to take a job. I vow here on this podcast to not take a job.
Yes, and that means that's like you could get sued for lying.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think that's the rule.
Yeah, it's a genuine
Christine
thing.
told me.
But you can't actually have a job.
I
like
know.
that's your.
But so I was driving.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
And people ask me a lot, like, do you miss the restaurant? And the one thing that I miss about the restaurant is, and I think people in the food service industry will know this, when a restaurant is humming, when everyone is doing their job perfectly, they're all in sync, you're all kind of just like with a look or with a nod, everything is going smoothly, all the money is coming in, you're feeling great. And then at the end of a shift, you just sit around with everyone and you just look at each other and it's like you're exhausted, but you're just having this great time because you're all in sync. And that is the one thing I miss. And I was driving yesterday from Syracuse and I drove to teach my entrepreneurship class. And I got there the moment that the class started. So it was like I was driving really fast. I got there. I taught the class. It was a great class. And I'm driving home 9 p.m. from Albany to my house. And I'm listening to music. And I got that feeling again. Like I got that restaurant feeling again. And it's because I didn't take this job, or I knew I wasn't going to take this job. It's that I was at this great conference. I was meeting all my people, seeing all my old colleagues, and also seeing all these people from the ecosystem. They were all excited to see me. I was excited to see them. Everything was humming. Everything was working perfectly. That drive was perfect. The class was perfect. And then I went home and I was like yelling to this music. And that is not something, like if you can't picture me having a TV, you probably cannot picture like me screaming into actually, you've heard me or seen me scream into a little bit of third eye blind when I've got a little frustrated with people who get a little upset.
What a flex. Can we go a little deeper on that?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know that it has anything to do with what you think it has to do with.
Ooh.
And I think what you actually experienced, and I'm not a psychotherapist, but my self-awareness is painful. I think what you understood when you were driving home is that you're alive.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Right?
That's exactly right.
And so I didn't do a lot of time in the industry, but I've worked in restaurants and my youngest brother is a Michelin star chef and I have over a dozen tenants who have restaurants, right? So restaurant people are my people. Like those are the people that I care about and that I lean into. And the benefit of what you're describing when you're humming and it's going well, what you have is a sense of community, right? And you are all on the same ship, headed in the same direction. And when you leave people, if you did 2 seatings over the course of a night and everybody leaves happy and everything was slammed and we crushed it, there's a camaraderie to the community that you're existing in. And what you experienced last night was you had your people, your camaraderie, and then you were with a group of younger people and your influence and your mentoring into them as a professor into saying like, hey, you can create something out of nothing. When you popped in your car, you had a day where you were reliant to nobody was like, hey, you have to do this for me right now, right? And you got to exist inside of infrastructures that you have created for yourself that allow you to understand the time and place you're in right now can feel infinite, right? So we know time is finite, but if you are spending your time over the course of, if you can smash 6 hours together where you are being what you were put on this earth to do, time will feel like it will last forever. And that is what is most detrimental to us as a region, is that we have built the exact opposite infrastructure where we encourage people from the time they are in their early 20s until their 60s that they should go sit in a chair and type on their computer and crank out this work that has none of that.
That's 100% true. And yesterday, I was speaking with the person who sponsored this episode, and he told me to make a joke when I was turning this job.
And you're not like a joker.
No, I'm not.
You can be funny, but you don't have a joke ready to go.
No, I'm like the dry human.
Yes. You're get to know me for a couple years, and you'll really think I'm funny.
That's right.
Right.
And so I was talking with this person, And he said, oh, and you can kind of make a joke like, I don't really stay someplace for like more than a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
And I was like offended by this joke.
Yeah.
And I called you, and for effect, I'm going to say this. I obviously did not say this, but like, Redburn. You gave me the
reputation.
The reputation of bouncing around,
Mm-hmm.
And you told me something that was great, which was that word that you hated from my first original stack of status.
Yeah.
It's that infrastructure of the region that made me feel embarrassed and upset about that comment, because what is valued here is staying someplace forever.
What's valued here is perseverance.
Yes.
But not perseverance of like, I'm going to get through this done. Perseverance of you go do your 40.
Yeah, that's right.
We live in jail here.
Yeah, it's intense.
Yeah, like you have to go do your time. And this is really challenging to talk about, because I made a huge mistake 10 years ago when I had started this company and I was flying high. And I would do these engagements where you would go speak to the Chamber of Commerce, and they would have their YPN events, right? And you have all these young professionals in this room. And I would grab the microphone and I would talk about how wonderful my life was as a 34, 35-year-old who decided I had had enough, and I was bucking the system and I was doing it on my own, and like everyone here should quit their job and go do this. It was a terrible thing to say. It was a terrible mantle to place on people who were trying to figure out what their life was going to be. And people have different values, right? When we went through these cards, we both chuckled, that like, we're not going to have kids, right? So like, we're here trying to do our thing and we don't have kids. So like, family is not going to be a big value for us, but it is for other people. And the assumption, so like, when I say you go to jail for 40 years, like, there are a lot of people who don't see that and never will. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. Like, we need people to function in those spaces for society to be okay. But as we're sitting here talking on this podcast to hopefully people who are trying to like figure out what it is they're supposed to be doing, it's very important to understand that your value system can be in place because you're conditioned to, you personally were conditioned to appreciate perseverance, right? You have an unbelievable academic background. People think highly of you when you floated into the city of Troy, like, I don't know, when was that, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
And I didn't meet you for the first couple of years you were there. And I was like, I was almost offended by your presence. Like, here, who's this out of towner? Heidi Knoblauch. Is she related to Chuck Knoblauch? First thing I thought. And I was just like, who is this person? And you had everyone's attention right away. You were the new golden child to the city of Troy. And I think that status perseverance thing comes from a bad ecosystem. And I love watching you break out of it. It's amazing because you never really allowed yourself to fully get into it, right? Like you were flirting with it, but you were never really fully there. And it was only like a matter of time. Whereas I think for me, I'm so anti that, and I wasn't always, but I am now. Like, I am anti what I'm talking about here.
You laughed hard when I conveyed that joke to you.
Which joke?
The year and a half to 2 years. Oh, you're going to stay someplace for a year and a half to 2 years. You had a hearty laugh.
I had a hearty laugh because I value that.
Yeah, I know.
Right? Like,
which is great.
Like, it was intended from you to say, this person was saying, hey, get your audience in with a self-deprecating joke where like, hey, you can make fun of yourself. And like, I'm the king of self-deprecation. But I think it's such a value that you have to not be handcuffed to something for the rest of your life. Like, what is Heidi Knoblauch going to do next? Nobody knows, right? And like, what an unbelievable place to exist in. Very uncomfortable, right? Like, don't get me wrong. You have to have a great support system, right? You have to value more than you logically should your own ability to figure things out. But the freedom that comes from, I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to figure out my way is wildly hopeful.
100%. Now it's time for our serious business lesson. So this week, in developing some consulting proposals, I was sending out crazy 18-page consulting proposals that were overwhelming my potential clients. Instead, I've decided to just trim it back. People really want something that they can read on their phone while they're walking around. So I've made a commitment to myself to only send proposals that are 750 words or less. And I'm going to see how that goes, and I'll get back to you later on in the month. And I think how you put that into a community is really important to talk about, right? So like what word did you use? You said I used artificial, you used
authentically.
Yeah, like sometimes people don't have the authenticity that they need in order to create this infrastructure for people to feel that way.
Yeah.
And I do think entrepreneurship, and people talk about this all the time, it's very lonely.
Oh, it's the worst.
It's the worst.
Like I just got done saying how freeing and amazing it is. It's also the worst possible thing you can do to yourself.
Yeah. No, it is.
Yeah.
It's very lonely. I self-doubt will kill an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to tell you, if I didn't have you, if I didn't have this team of advisors, if I didn't have our mystery person who we're going to bring in hopefully next week,
Yeah.
call them on the way here. I do think that, as I start to forge my path, right? And honestly, I think as we start to forge a path as like stuff that we want to do, I've learned a tremendous amount that I think can be applied to this ecosystem. It can be applied to lots of other ecosystems for sure, not just in New York State, but I have to tell you, there is in middle markets and rural areas, it is incredibly important that we start to talk about building out an infrastructure that supports innovation,
Yeah.
that supports creativity. I mean, that's an old idea, right? The creative economy, knowledge workers, that's an old idea.
New York State values more than anything else jobs, right? JOBS. How many jobs are we creating? How much money can I get you based on how many jobs you're going to do? And listen, I am not a direct job creator. I create jobs secondarily, right? I can create a restaurant space and the restaurant can hire, 50 people and those are 50 jobs, but like they're not attached to me. What we do a really poor job at, I've already said it once today, but I will this is the hill I'm going to die on. Let's say person A and person B are living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and New York is trying to get them to come here to create, their widget company, because nothing is entrepreneurial more than widgets. If I'm trying to recruit Heidi Knoblauch, CEO of Widget Express, to move to New York, how would you do it and how would I do it? Those are vastly different ways that we would go about it, and we both can be right.
Yep.
What I want to know from Heidi Knoblauch is who's your partner, your life partner, not your business partner. I want to know who your life partner is and what are they doing with their life and what kind of infrastructure do they need to exist in for their happiness to actually matter as much as the person I'm trying to recruit here. And that's where we're falling flat, is that not only do we lack an entrepreneurial infrastructure that we need to build up, but we also have this side thing where we need to create an infrastructure where other people just want to be, because I can go offer you $1 million a job for every job you're going to bring. And you're going to bring 200 jobs and there's a $200 million economic development project and look at you, yay. But if you're with somebody in life who really loves Tulsa, Oklahoma, or really loves Denver, Colorado, or really loves anywhere USA, you are a key part of that decision making. And we miss that completely. We miss the importance of human feeling into the investments that we are making.
Yeah, and thinking about those business expansion and retention, because that's what that is. It's a business expansion and retention strategy.
Sure.
Entrepreneurship, I would argue, is also a business expansion and retention strategy
it is.
that is not as valued,
Yeah.
or has not historically been as valued, and now all of a sudden is becoming valued, which I think is good. So in this episode, we talk about infrastructure. Sales process is just another infrastructure that you need to start and grow a business. And really, the Sandler system is something that you can replicate for any business, and Matt will help you fine-tune it to your own personal business. And if you want to reach out to Matt, it's super easy. He's really accessible. You can give him a call on his cell phone, which is 518-366-0004, and just tell him that Heidi sent you. And you can always email him too. His email is matt.scarkelly@sandler.com. His last name is spelled SCARCHILLI.
We are both in this space where what's next is a huge unknown, but we are at the point where we've acquired enough knowledge to know, well, that's right and it'll work, and that's wrong and it won't. And what do we do out of that? And I think one of the things that's been most interesting for me with my entrepreneurial cap on is you have said to me, in the past couple months, we should do this thing. And I think we'll make some money doing it. And I think we'll actually get a kick out of it. And I think it'll work. And me, 10 years ago for sure, and me even 5 years ago, I would say pre-COVID me, would have been like grasping at your hand and saying, let's do it, let's run, let's go with it. And I have been the exact opposite with you because I've now recognized energy patterns. And you're right, it'll be awesome. But I need to let you get to the point where you're like, yeah, no, this is what I want to do. And then I can adjust my life, because that's what I've made my life to be, to go alongside of that when you're ready. And I have no idea what I'm talking about right now, but there was this idea that floated in my head that I felt like it needed to be said because we've never talked about what we're talking about right now. I think that's a very interesting point, right? None of this is rehearsed. I didn't even know what we were talking about coming into this. So this is a very fluid, active conversation, and you're bringing up a lot of stuff in me that's just like, yeah, what are we doing? And how can we do it? Now I want to do an 8-part episode where we literally break down all of these things and how important they are, because I feel like we're talking good talk here, and I think people need to hear it.
People are going to have to tune in next week to learn what Tiger Woods' mad is.
You're so ridiculous. You're such a ridiculous person. Yeah. I've never that's the thing that offends you the most.
I don't think.
So they have to talk you know what we should do? We should talk about what that actually is and then break down why it is next time.
I agree.
Tune in next week for why Heidi Knoblauch believes Tiger Woods is not better for the game. You led me down a bunch of interesting paths where I feel like I've been in therapy now for like 45 minutes. What is your personal favorite something from nothing? Because you've done it over and over and over again in your life. What's your favorite one?
That's good. I mean, it has to be Plum Oyster Bar. It has to be Plum Oyster Bar. I mean, that, because you know Troy so well, that was a floral shop.
Floral shop, yeah. With
a drop ceiling, with, white tiles, green carpet, the whole thing.
Yep.
And
nondescript building.
Very nondescript building.
Quiet block.
Yep.
Yep.
And to come in to that space. And I really created the restaurant because it was community. It was to bring people together. And so when I walked into that space and saw it, what I saw was an opportunity to kind of coalesce people together. But to actually do it, I went to the Troy LDC and I said, can I have a $50,000 loan? And they said, no, we're going to give it to that other guy. That restaurant closed in 6 months, but we're going to give it to that other guy. We'll give you $25,000, and we're going to take a mortgage on your house and on my mother's house. And the closing costs were like so much money.
Yeah, not worth it.
Not worth it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And so, I remember my bank account from those early days of Plum. That was very intense. And actually, if I didn't have that loan from the LDC,
you wouldn't have made it.
I wouldn't have made it. So I needed it, right? But that was truly creating something from nothing.
I love it because it became this space, and that's actually where you and I became so close, because during COVID, I could just ride my bike over and sit on your steps and we could commiserate about the world. And it's really interesting that your best something from nothing is 70 yards away from my best something from nothing, even though they were a decade apart.
Yep.
I don't need to tell a story here, but like my first thing and your first thing were very close, and we took very similar paths to get there. And what's interesting about both of those paths, you went and got a loan from the LDC. I went and bought a building from the LDC, actually, that turned into Slide and Dirty. Both of those things happened, and both of them became very vital pivot points in downtown Troy, even though they were pretty far apart years-wise. They were both important moments in the existence and functionality of a city, and both required an infrastructure to actually be in place to allow it to happen. And if you look at those two projects alone, you're talking about hundreds of jobs over the course of a decade, probably hundreds of thousands of people fed, and infinite amounts of memorable moments that can't be recreated, all because the infrastructure actually existed for it to happen.
100%. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to our sponsors. Sandler is fantastic and definitely someone that I would reach out to if you're ever thinking about going through a sales training. And if you'd like to reach out to me or to Jeff, our Information is in the show notes, and please do reach out. We'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to sponsor an upcoming episode, email sponsor@plumline.cc. That's PLUMBLINE.cc. Thanks for listening.